Okay, the next chapter is 14. We're going to talk about the brain and the cranial nerves. We have in there the overview of the brain. So let's take a look at the brain. And we see that the brain is not flat like a table, right? It has elevations and grooves. As you can see right here, this is an elevation. This is a groove, elevation, groove. Okay, the elevations are called gyras, and the grooves are called sulcus. One sulcus to keep in mind is this one. This one is very long, and this one is called the central sulcus. So, but there is a very long groove, which is this one right here. It goes straight down. This is called the longitudinal fissure, and the longitudinal fissure is going to divide your brain in two hemispheres. This is going to be the right hemisphere, and this other side is going to be the left hemisphere. Not only that, but the brain can also be divided in lobes. So if this is where your face is, this is going to be the frontal lobe. This is going to be the parietal lobe. This is going to be the occipital lobe around here. And down here is going to be the temporal lobe. The reason why I was telling you that central sulcus is important because the central sulcus separates your frontal lobe from your parietal lobe. As you can see right here, parietal lobe and frontal lobe. Okay, in addition to that, this figure is showing us other structures that you have. Cerebellum, which is this one right here, and your brain stem down here. We're going to scroll down. And we're going to see the same structures, but in picture of a real brain. So you see here, this is a gyra, and the grooves are going to be sulcus. This is the central sulcus. As I was telling you, this is the brain, and you have in here again the cerebellum, and this part right here is going to be the brain stem. So let's keep going down. And we're going to find this figure where we're cutting the brain in the middle through the longitudinal fissure, and we can see the inside part of the brain. In this case, again, we said this is cerebral cortex. This is the cerebellum. We mentioned that this is going to be the brainstem, and inside you have all this clear area right here, all this area right here. This is going to be the diencephalon. Not only that, they are showing you here there are some cavities. As you can see right here, there are some cavities. These are going to be called the ventricles. If we keep scrolling down, we have in here again a picture of a real brain where you have again cerebellum on the back. Front is going to be the brainstem. In the middle is going to be the diencephalon, and on top of all that is going to be the cerebral cortex. But right here you can clearly see the spaces that we have inside our brain. They are going to be called the ventricles. Inside these spaces we are going to have the cerebral spinal fluid. If we keep scrolling down, we are going to see that we have gray and white matter, and that's what we have in our cerebral cortex. Gray matter is provided by the body of the neurons, and white matter is the axon. Embryonic development, this is not an embryology class, so you can skip all that. I'm not going to ask you anything about embryonic development. Again, this is not a topic of anatomy, so you can skip all that, and that's about it for this part. The next topic is meninges, ventricles, cerebrospinal fluid, and blood supply. All of them, one way or another, they're going to provide protection to your brain, the same way as they do it with the spinal cord. We already mentioned the meninges before in the previous chapter, and we said the meninges we have three. They're going to be the dura mater, arachnoid mater, and pia mater. As you can see here, dura mater, arachnoid mater, and pia mater. Pia mater is the one that is the closest to the brain. Arachnoid mater is in the middle, and the dura mater is the one that is closest to the skull. And they are going to cover the brain, not only the brain, but also the spinal cord. Okay, so we keep scrolling down, and we have the ventricles and the cerebrospinal fluid. I already mentioned in the previous topic where these cavities are located in our brain. We have cavities, and these cavities, we said that they are going to be called ventricles. These ventricles are occupied by this blue fluid that we have in here. This blue fluid is the cerebrospinal fluid. It's called cerebrospinal fluid because, as you can see in here, it's not only in your brain, but also goes down here towards your spinal cord. Therefore, this is called the cerebrospinal fluid. We have different areas in here, different spaces. The spaces, as I said, they are going to be called ventricles. We have 1, 2. They are called lateral ventricles. This is going to be the third one. Therefore, this is called the third ventricle. And down here, you're going to have another one, and this is going to be called the fourth ventricle. Okay, the communication between the third and fourth ventricle is provided by the cerebral aqueduct. And very important to notice is at the level of the fourth ventricle, you have the lateral apertures. The lateral apertures will allow the fluid to come out and bathe the brain as well as the spinal cord on the outside. The median aperture continues down through the central canal in order to take the fluid to the spinal cord. You can see right here in this transverse cut, the spaces, these are going to be the ventricles, and inside there you have the cerebrospinal fluid. So if we keep scrolling down, we can see what happens with the cerebrospinal fluid. The cerebrospinal fluid is formed in the choroid plexus. Inside the choroid plexus, you're going to find the ependymal cells that are going to start producing the cerebrospinal fluid. They produce approximately 500 milliliters, and 350 milliliters more or less of that fluid is reabsorbed. And we have 150 milliliters most of the time inside our brain and our spinal cord. So this fluid comes down right here, and as I said, through the lateral apertures that will come out and bathe the brain as well as the spinal cord. How it gets reabsorbed? Because it goes out, and through the arachnoid villus, the fluid gets reabsorbed right here into the superior sagittal sinus that eventually is going to dump all that fluid into the systemic circulation. So this fluid basically provides several functions, such as, for example, cushion, because if you get hit, your brain can move and can hit the inside of your skull. That doesn't happen because the cerebrospinal fluid is going to provide protection against that. Other functions, buoyancy. The cerebrospinal fluid allows the brain to be suspended in the fluid, because if you don't have this fluid, then the bottom of the brain will rest on your skull, and then the neurons at the bottom of your brain will get damaged because of the weight of the brain. So that doesn't happen because, again, the fluid provides buoyancy. So we already talked about protection, chemical stability. The brain has cells, and these cells are going to produce different chemicals, and these chemicals, they must be removed. For example, there's going to be hydrogen, and hydrogen changes pH, and obviously that's going to produce changes in pH, and that's a problem because the pH in your brain must be maintained. So the cerebrospinal fluid allows us to get rid of this waste, for example, that we get there. Blood supply and blood-brain barrier. The brain depends a lot on blood, right? If you don't get blood to your brain, you will pass out. So it's very important. However, yes, we need all this blood, but this blood may contain nutrients which are necessary. So it's important to provide nutrients to the brain, but also it may contain a lot of waste, right? It will contain bacteria, microorganisms that we don't want in our brain. So therefore, there's something called the blood-brain barrier, as you can see right here, blood-brain barrier. So the blood-brain barrier is provided by the walls of the blood vessel, as well as the extensions that we get from the astrocytes. And this allows only certain things to cross towards your brain, but some other things will not cross from your blood into your brain. This is important again because, for example, we don't want bacteria to go inside your brain. However, your brain must keep homeostasis of your body, therefore it must get information about the chemical composition, for example, of your blood and different areas in your body. So because of that, the blood-brain barrier, yes, it covers all your entire brain, but there are some areas in which it doesn't have this blood-brain barrier, and those areas are the circumventricular organs. Unfortunately, these areas, because they are open, they also allow certain microorganisms to get inside your brain this way, such as, for example, HIV. Also, a lot of times it's a good thing, but sometimes it's not so good, because if you need, for example, an antibiotic to get into your brain to treat an infection, the blood-brain barrier will stop this antibiotic from reaching your brain. Therefore, it's going to be very hard to treat the infection because of that reason. So it's a good thing, but in some circumstances, it is not. And let's keep going, and that's about it.